Welcome back. On today's bookshelf, I have something truly special. Author Naledi Mashishi's latest offering, Invisible Strings, is a unique story of a young girl with a rare gift. That in turn put her in a unique position to offer healing to her family and community, but it also exposes the young girl to exploitation. Joining us now to delve deeper into this proudly South African novel is the author herself, Naledi Mashishi, eNCA Technical Director, Tirelo Makgeledisa, and eNCA Assistant Program, Bazukile Diko. Thank you very much, guys, for your time. I want to start with you, Naledi. You know, in the book, you mentioned that you dedicated specifically to your grandfather because you were able to tell him stories about spiders. What did you mean by that?
So, I have always had a vivid imagination. I've always really loved storytelling. And my mom constantly talks about how when I was between the ages of about 1 and 3, I never spoke to anyone. So she sent me to my grandfather, and I only spoke to him. And then I started speaking, and I didn't stop. And one of the things I would do with him is I would tell him stories. So my parents loved telling this story about how I was with my grandfather, and I held an entire room of adults captive with this story about a spider that just never ended. And my grandfather would keep encouraging me, and he would keep asking me, so what happens next, so what happens next? And so that's really where my love of storytelling began. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2001. And one thing I was thinking while writing this book is that he really would have loved to have been here and read it. So that's why I decided to dedicate the story to him.
So this book is about Makgeledisa, a young girl who falls pregnant at a young age because she trusted Luvuyo, her boyfriend, who became, you know, that type of father that we call Papa was a Rolling Stone. So just tell us a little bit, did you at any point experience this, or do you know of a family that experienced this? Because as I read this book, I thought to myself, this is actually somebody's real life experience.
So there are parts of my personal story that are in the book, but it's not really stuff like that. So with Makgeledisa's story in particular, I didn't experience that. I was lucky enough to not experience that, but I do know of people who have, and who've had similar stories where, you know, with this guy, they had a good time, they got pregnant, and then the guy left when it really mattered. So I wanted to make the story feel real. So I wanted to integrate as many real life stories as I could, while obviously keeping the fantastical elements, just to ground it in reality.
Tirelo and Bazukile, I want to bring you guys in here. I specifically enjoyed how in every chapter she sort of introduced a new person and spoke in that person's perspective. So in the beginning it was Makgeledisa and this fake gold chain that she was so obsessed about. Then in the second chapter it was about her mom, Mahlatsi. Then it became about Tato, the child, and then the perspective of her uncle, etc. I enjoyed specifically that.
It was really well written. Congratulations on this novel. It's really a special story. And that method that you used, it carried us throughout the story. And it was nice to experience all those characters because, as you just said, it's drawing from so much of what we know and people we experience. And to do that in the novel, to say now it's Tato's turn, now it's Makgeledisa's turn, now it gave us an opportunity to really understand what was the whole point of the story, where was it going, but also to recognize that even when something is happening to all of us, we experience it differently. Even if it's at the same time, we all have different concerns or different feelings towards what's happening around us. So it was really a clever way of going about telling this very, very strange, I would say it's like a fairy story, fairy is a compliment. It was really enjoyable, and I love the narrative devices that you used. It was really great.
Ooh, I did not sleep. I spent the whole night reading this book, and I'm thinking, you owe me. You owe me what is it? And it was it's a well written book. And what I enjoyed the most about the book is that even if it's fiction, there's so many of things, so much stuff that's relatable, particularly the pastor story. The way he abuses the child, the way he wants to use the child's power for his own benefit. And I loved the story and the manifestation of the late sister on the child. And the interpretation that I had was this the sisters taking over or possessing the child's body? you know how normally you would think I have a calling? For example, my personal story is that I started seeing visions at the age of 8. With Tato is that the aunt was living through her to tell the story. Now, sometimes I have noticed, but this is personal, it's just me, that some of us, we are not meant to ukutwasa. We just have this gift so that we can heal. So with Tato, it was her way of healing generational curses, you know, through the bloodline. And after she did this, boom, everything, there was peace at home. So sometimes you need that person. They say, Naledi, so this child was the hedge that kept the house intact. Yeah. And she was born for that purpose, for that period of time. So sometimes we really need to investigate before we go further. And that's where you find our pastors calling children possessed and calling us demonized. I was exorcised many times because people thought that I was convinced that I was demonized. I had demons as well. We have demonized people's experiences. When I was Mozalwane, there was a time when I was a Bible-bashing Christian. I spoke in tongues and yay, chicken flick, you know. And, you know, you really believed those things. And even the pastor realizing that this child is so gifted and exploiting the child's gifts, these things exist. Yeah. They are there. We know people, you know, we've been watching Abba Bishop today. Exactly. With people who do horrible stuff just so that they can get people to come into church. And it's all about this.
It's all about money.
The pastor, the mother, it's all about money. Yes. Greed, greed, greed.
And I think what broke my heart, Bazune, at some point, Naledi, when I was reading this book and I read about this little girl whose mother basically was sort of not caring about her until she realized that she could make her money, and the family also not understanding her because she was so quiet. And in the book you describe that it was as if she was born into the family knowing that she was unplanned and that no one cared about her, so she just kept quiet in her little corner. And that's what literally broke my heart, thinking about this young girl. And as she grows up, because she's so gifted, people started wanting to spend time with her. Her uncle is saying, bring her so I can spend a day with her. The pastor exploiting her, the mother suddenly loving her to bits, etc. That for me really just broke my heart.
You know, I feel like the child was burdened from birth. While in the womb already, you know, it was like, I don't want you, you're an inconvenience. You here, I had big plans, I'm in university, I'm a hot girl, I have this whole future ahead of me. Boom, I'm pregnant. Now suddenly this child, it starts implanting from the womb that you must always just not bother anyone. And her mother, Tato's mother, is very, very selfish.
Yes.
So selfish that half the time I was like, this woman annoys me. She really, really annoys me. I would not even like have coffee with her. Sorry about that. And it's like, as you said, she withdraws, she keeps out of the way. And then all this attention starts coming. And all the while, no one ever asks, how are you? How does this, having this gift, how does it, how do you feel about it? Because even in school, she feels strange. She sees dead people with dead strings withered away. Some of the words that you use, faded out. This is heavy stuff, you know, and it's hard to talk about those things. And she has no one to really talk to because she realizes at some point, again, she's burdened as a child to think like an adult. Oh no, I can see that having this gift also makes my family uncomfortable. So let me not tell them about this other side of it. They know that they can benefit from me finding things, but now they mustn't know that I see dead people or people with gunshots and they have got gaping holes, you know. It's heavy stuff.
An 8-year-old.
Yeah, and you know, as Tirelo speaks about her personal experience, for me, my gift has never been a hectic thing. I'm a qualified sangoma. I was born a healer, but trained only 2 years ago. But what I know is that from the age of 4, I always had dreams of things and they would happen. And I didn't understand it until around 7, I told my gran one day about a recurring dream that I kept having only when I was at her house. And then she looked at my mom, she's like, oh my God, she's got it. There was never a discussion about it after that, you know. So I could relate to that, having not understanding, do you share this with people? Or when something happens, you're like, oh my God, but I saw that 3 days ago. Everyone's going to say you're lying because now it's happened. And you didn't tell anyone because you were also like, what is this thing? So it was interesting for me to read the book because it made me think of my own children and to say, if I recognize gifts in them, how will I protect them? How will I nurture it? How will I make them have pride in it and not feel that there has to be certain parts they don't share? They must be able to be themselves and able to express whatever it is that they experience. And yeah, it triggered a lot of things for me. It was really a special moment to sit with this book.
Yeah,
I wanted to find out from you, especially with the mother. Was she suffering from postnatal depression? Because there's another theme that I got. You know, all the symptoms, the way she rejected the child. She just could not even hold the child. She was such an absent mother. She was aloof. She was not a mother. Was it the postnatal depression? Because I thought it was a very important topic to also touch on, because a lot of mothers go through this, particularly with unplanned kids. You know, with kids that are unwanted kids. We never talk about it in our communities. And then we wonder why mothers would then reject their children. Was that the intention?
So I wanted to kind of keep it ambiguous, because I didn't want to say it's postnatal depression and then, you know, have a whole bunch of, like, and then find out that I've completely misrepresented it. Okay. So, but I thought that it was important, because when you look at a lot of mainstream narratives of motherhood, it's very positive. It tends to be very, you know, my child came and completely changed my life and I've never been happier. And that's kind of the predominant narrative that you get. And even, you know, people who are like anti-abortion, that's a typical narrative that they'll say, oh, when the child comes, they'll make you so happy and for some people that's not what motherhood is. You know, for some people, motherhood is not this happy thing full of smiles and rainbows. It's something that if they could go back and do things differently, they wouldn't do it. In fact, a big part of what inspired my writing of Makgeledisa was I found this Facebook page called I Regret Having Children.
Sure.
And it's literally full of parents writing in anonymously about how much they regret having kids, how if they could go back, they wouldn't have kids, and for various reasons. For some of them, their kids were very difficult. They had significant behavioral problems, and they're like, I never knew it was going to be this hard. For other parents, they'll say, I had this child that was an unplanned pregnancy, or my partner wanted a child, but I didn't, so I had the child for the partner, and talking about how miserable they are and how much, you know, they miss having freedoms. And so I thought that it might be worth having a character who feels that way. And I will admit that the way she goes about it isn't the best. You know? In fact, after I wrote the first draft, I thought she comes across so terribly. Believe it or not, but she came across worse when I wrote her at first. She came across even worse. So I was like, let me try and
make it little,
and make her a little bit.
No, she's still devoid of any characteristics that I say are likable, but I can also respect her because she's honest throughout. The character is very honest about who she is, what she's about. She doesn't try to pretend to be a good mother, but she does have a moment.
Yeah.
And the moment comes almost too late, but just in time, where she realizes that I'm a mother first, and this child, I brought her into this world, and I have now put her in danger. This pastor is draining literally the life out of my child. I have to stand up and fight. And that's a moment where I was like, that's all that matters.
Yes.
That in the end, she realized that I don't have to be the best mother. I don't have to be happy about having a child, but this child needs me.
She has to be
and in that moment, I was like, whew, finally, I can actually deal with you.
Almost too late.
You know?
Another important topic for me was also about her father and how he literally rejected her, called her very horrible names when they told him that she had fallen pregnant. You know, there's that topic in our society where you have absent fathers or a father who marries somebody else and completely forgets about you, says very horrible things about the child that you're pregnant with. I think actually the uncle, there were funny moments in your book as well, the uncle Mulifi, describing her as somebody who looked exactly like her mother but was as horrible as her father. And when I met that character, her father, I just thought this is another topic where, you know, fathers think that they can just abandon not only their children, but even the fact that their children are saying, listen, I'm sorry, I'm pregnant, but I need you to be there as a father and a grandfather. And he just decided no. And it's also another topic of these integrated families, right, where they were expecting the father to arrive alone, but he arrived with his wife, his new wife, and it was a very awkward moment suddenly in that kitchen, and people just couldn't deal with this woman, and she doesn't even get to say a word in the book.
Yeah, I think that with the father, it was also another thing that I've been thinking about, because when you talk about absent fathers, we only ever really talk about them in the context of like the Luvuyos of the world, the ones who don't ever show up, right? Whereas, you know, I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and one topic that keeps coming up when you talk about absent fathers on Twitter are the fathers who are present in the home but are absent in every other way.
Or present money-wise.
Yeah, or present money-wise, or are absent in every other way. And I thought that it was an interesting thing to talk about, because if you think about Kheti, she did have a father. He just wasn't a very good one. Yeah. And he wasn't present in the moments that matter. And you see that with her narrative, and you see that with Mahlathi's narrative as well, where Mahlathi talks about how she was the one who really had to do the bulk of the raising. When Kheti was out being Kheti, her father didn't want to deal with that, and Mahlathi was the one who had to deal with that. So I felt that it was also important to talk about those kinds of situations.
I just wanted to find out from you, especially with the theme about men, yes, I was like stereotypical, you know, growing up, there's something that I call the silent language of women. You know how we'll all get together, and there's a young girl, you're the young girl, and you're going to pick up from your mom, from your grandparents, stuff that you write on Facebook, and such an angry generation of women. I know from I'm a third generation of angry women in my family. Sorry to say that, guys, but yeah, you know, where you get rejected by the father of your child. I've been called names too, it's not a secret. I have some diseases that are not going to heal. That's my baby daddy. No, he's going to shout at me, but it's fine. So tell me, when you were writing this book, did you deliberately set out to make the men... There's only one good guy, it's Mulifi, right?
Yes. And he's funny as well.
Gay as well, you know. And don't you all have gay friends? They're always the nice guys. The guys that we go to and we cry about our cases when the men leave you because you are pregnant. Why don't they just use condoms if they don't want kids? It's always our fault, right? But they just don't want to use condoms. What I want to understand is that, did you set out to make the men look so bad?
I actually didn't. Funny enough, I actually didn't. To the point where I was like, oh no, like considering how I write about fathers in this book, people are going to think things about my relationship with my dad. Yeah. I actually have a very good relationship with my father. And I even told him when he read the book, listen, don't think that what I've written here reflects on how I feel about you. Because, you know, even though my parents divorced when I was 2, he's always been present in my life, not just when it comes time to pay bills, but, you know, we have an actual relationship. So I think that I drew a lot from other things that I've read, from other people's experiences, from my other family members' experiences. But also, I kind of wanted to write a book where no one really behaves well except Tato, because she's 9. You know? So if you look at the women, I mean, even the women tend to behave quite badly, because I like stories where there aren't necessarily good and bad characters, where characters are a mix of the two. The only character that I would consider to be like a good character is Tato. Everyone else behaves badly at some point or another.
So we have to wrap up. Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. I really enjoyed this book, and thank you very much for this offering. It's definitely something that I would recommend to those of you who are watching today. I want to thank you guys for coming through. Author Naledi Mashishi, eNCA Technical Director Tirelo, Makgeledisa, and eNCA Assistant Program Editor Bazukile Diko.